Hello, beautiful beings. Welcome to Let's Create the Revolution Together, a podcast about creating new ways to embody ourselves as human. If you're here, you're probably well aware of all the shifts that are happening on our planet. Maybe you go with the flow with those changes, or maybe you're struggling to find who you truly are. Either way, this space right here is for you. My name is Marigold Era. I'm an Ayurvedic wellness coach, a spiritual life coach, and a podcaster. I am here to guide you through this reality that we can call the Earth School. I strongly believe that we are here to create new ways to show up as individual and as collective, and that every experience that we encounter is an opportunity to grow and evolve. So grab yourself something to drink, make yourself comfortable, and let's jump right into the next episode. Hello, beautiful beings. It's Marigold. This is my second solo episode, but my first one only the voice. And so I'm super glad to be here with you today. I wanted to start this episode with saying how amazed I am by this process that I'm in, in doing this podcast. It all started at the end of June after doing a 3 weeks program called the CBA, and I had this deep intuition that I needed to step inside something new. And I was trying so hard to become a coach for 2 years now, 2 or 3 years even, and it wasn't working. And I was struggling. I was always struggling, and it was almost painful to keep on showing up on social media, trying to sell my programs. And after that program, that 3 weeks program, it was just super clear that I needed to make my voice heard. And so I started this podcast, and I jumped on Facebook, I asked my friends, my following, my network, if they were interested in sharing their story about living a life outside the mainstream box and inside their aligned self. And I had just so many responses, and it was amazing and overwhelming, and I got super slammed with all kinds of beautiful, wonderful, inspiring people that I'm still meeting at that moment every week, at least 2. And it's just such a cool ride to be on right now, to meet all kinds of cool people like that, create relationship with people that wants to bring meaning into the world. And I'm enjoying this so much. I have so much love for this podcast, and I am thrilled to keep on interviewing those wonderful people. But then it helped, like something just clicked today. I was in another course, a course that is like more specifically around podcasting, and I was like, hell, I'm there for all those wonderful beings, and I love to speak with them. And I also realized that I'm not speaking up. I'm there, I'm listening to them, and I love their stories. And I kind of need to tell my own stories, and I have like so many angles, and I want to share those angles with you. Because I matter as well, right? As a mother, I have 2 beautiful daughters and 1 stepdaughter. And it is just so easy to just put everything else before myself, and I don't want to. I just don't want to fall into that trap that I know myself falling into so easily. And so I'm going to take charge right now by telling a part of my story. And I thought of telling the story of how I became a mother, because it's such an important part of my life. And to tell that story, I'm gonna have to rewind a little bit because, it's been such a ride. So just before I go really deep into that story, I'm just gonna introduce past Marigold, which was a train wreck. Past Marigold was into drugs and sex and alcohol and rock and roll and partying and dancing on speakers and bars and hooking up with guys and girls sometimes. And I was all over the place. And I got to a point where I was actually living in Montreal, and the boyfriend I had at the time dumped me because he was cheating on me with someone else, and it was just a whole mess. My father came and literally picked me up in my apartment, where I got left there, just stood up, not able to pay the bills because I was used to paying them with this guy. So it was just very awful. And of course, I didn't want to really go back to living with my father because that was just not a good plan. Although we did for a couple of weeks or like maybe a month, just to give me a little time to get back on the horse. And that's when I started to work at that farm, and that's where everything in my life shifted. I was working on that farm, on that huge land. There were like many greenhouses in which we were growing tomatoes, cucumbers, radishes, that kind of stuff. And that place was amazing. It kind of saved my life. And I was always someone that was super highly creative, but there was something over there, like working with thousands of tomato plants at the time. You're working with them one by one, like ripping those leaves and like turning their head over this wire for them to grow higher and stronger. And so by doing this so many times, you get into this meditative state of being, because you're always doing the same thing, and it's hot and you're sweating, and you got like, the sound is very different when you're in those big, huge greenhouses. And I was by myself. I was like basically working there with the owner of the farm, an old guy, amazing guy. And so I don't know if the farm or the plant or the meditative stage just saved me, but just started to do yoga session with myself, just like moving my body in some different ways. And I started to do photography, which I was always very involved in. But at that moment, I don't know, something was different. And I was like working with this old analogic Canon, I don't remember the number, but it was a freaking old camera that I loved working with. And I started to paint. And as I was painting, I don't know, like, everything that I was everything that I was, everything that I've been through, everything that was like really deep into shadows and struggles or trauma just surfaced back, and I was putting everything in my painting. And that one day I was in this cafe in town where I was living, and I don't know, I just clicked with the owner of the gallery. It was a cafe gallery, and I showed her what I was working on, and she was just like mind blown, and she proposed to me to expose my work. And so I did, and by the end of that summer, I sold a lot of paintings, and I gathered some money from my work at the farm. And since I was also living at that farm, I don't think I mentioned that, but yeah, I was working and living at that farm. The man that was owning the farm was like, he built an apartment above his house early on in his life, and yeah, so I was living there. So it was like pretty peaceful to be living there. Coming from Montreal, it was way different. So that lady at the gallery, she proposed to me, and so I sold those paintings, and I gathered the money from working at the farm. And since I was also living there, like, I wasn't paying much rent, and I just started to I just had to follow my intuition that was like strongly telling me, this is time for you to just like go. And I was like, why? And it was like saying to me, like, this voice inside of me was saying, you gotta die. Like, some parts of you need to die. And I was like, wow, that's intense. And I was never the one to shy away from intenseness. So I was like, okay, so how do I do that? And so I was the way I was moving around to go do grocery and stuff, I had like this little electric scooter that I was like charging every day. And that one time I was going to the grocery store, and I saw this car, an old Mazda 323. It was green, hatchback. It was it was old, but I knew that was the car that I needed to go. And so I called the number that was like on the little for sale sign, and I just bought the car. I didn't know anything about mechanic. It was actually my first car, and as I said, I was living in Montreal, so I wasn't a big driver at the time, right? Because in Montreal, you don't really have to, because there's a subway and buses, and like, you just don't really have to drive. I had my licenses, but I wasn't like a big driver at the time. So I bought that car, and I packed everything I could in there, and I took off. And I crossed. I was at that time, I was in Quebec in Canada, which is like the east part of Canada where they speak French. And I decided to just cross Canada, and I ended up in British Columbia on a little land where there was like a restaurant and a camping, and the lady that was working there was also from Quebec. And so we just started to talk, and she offered me a place to stay. And it was like, well, it was after my season at the farm, so it was like probably like end of September / October. And yeah, so I was at that place, and I was working there for a while to just like gather a little bit of money, because I had this intuition that I needed to go south. and that I needed to go like real south. And so when the snow started to come in, I was like, okay, that's my cue. And I just left. I left this place and I just drove south until I reached California, and more specifically, the south of California, and more specifically, Coachella Valley in the desert. And as I was in that hot space, and it was damn hot coming from the north, and having winters of like minus 40 degrees Celsius and foot of snow, like so many feet. You can, like, winters that reached like 6 feet of snow, you know. And so being in the desert, it was it was something else. And I didn't leave with a lot of money, I have to say. Like, I left with like something like $1,000, and I made a little bit more when I was in BC, but I wasn't traveling like with $10,000 in my bank account, and I was sleeping in my car, and it was the adventure. And so it was like I would go like deeper into those experiences on another episode, because there were just so many amazing story on that trip. And it was a long trip. It took me like a year to get back into my home. And so, yeah. So at that moment, when I was in the south of California, in the desert, out of money, I ended up in the shelter, a Christian shelter, where people were talking about Jesus and telling me that it was very, very, very dangerous to be out there in the streets around that area, because they were like Mexican gangbanger, or so they said. And I really didn't know about any of that. And it was 2010, and I was never into like being so techie, you know. So I don't know if people had smartphone at that moment. Sorry if I'm so like not knowledgeable about that. But the thing I know is that I didn't have any cell phone, any smartphone for sure. I had like my computer, but like it wasn't like, so I didn't make any research. I was just following my intuition. And so I was at that shelter, and it was like all kinds of weird people. and man, it was just so out of my comfort zone, I'll say that. And so, like, I remember sleeping the first night, and I just wanted to go back sleeping in my car. But the people at the shelter, they didn't want me to go back in my car, because they said it was too dangerous. So I was sleeping with, like, I don't know, like maybe 30 people in this small rooms, and like everybody's farting, and it's just awful. And I want to get out of there as soon as I can, because I'm just lost at that moment. And there is like all kinds of old guy, a little creepy around the edges, that are like trying to hit on that little 26-year-old that's not from the States, that doesn't know anything. And they were trying to hit on me. And it was like, I started to get really scared. And I was smoking cigarettes at the time. And I was out there like just outside the shelter smoking one, and I was like trying to ask the gods, the life, the universe, whatever, just like bring me something, you know, because I don't know how I can survive this. And so that's when this man, older than me, like, he had like dark skin, but not like black. He was like more on the Native American kind of, yeah, he was Native American, and he had like this dark skin and this gray hair and this great smile and like these working hand. And he was smoking as well, and he was like, yo, what's up? And I was like, I don't know, man, this place is crazy. And he was like, tell me about it. And he offered me a deal. He was like, I just got out of jail and I have a car that is way over there and I have to get there. So you have a car, I can help you, you can help me. What do you say? And I was like, I just had to trust my intuition on this one, as I did the whole trip, right? And so that's what I did. I followed my intuition and I went with him. And this guy, Robert, that was his name, changed my life. He changed my whole life. And so I'm gonna skip all the juicy detail for now because that's another podcast as well. But let's just say that this relationship, it was a roller coaster. It was sweet and insane and crazy and aggressive and loving, and it was all kinds of stuff. And the guy was way older than me, but we did get along and we did make a really good team. And he was a mechanic and we were doing road service on the highway. We were going like from one place to another, looking out for people that were like on the side of the road to help them to get a little money, because he was also living in his car. And the thing that I didn't know was that homeless people in the south of California were also living in their car as I was doing. But I was a traveler and I felt like I really didn't know about that. So anyway, so that's how we did our money for a while. And then by doing this, we got in contact with the guy that was working in, he was the owner actually of a big taxi flock, and he offered Robert a job to work as a mechanic. And so we actually went to work in there, and I was working with Robert. I was helping him, and so he was paying me. So I was like paid under the table. So that was our life for like around 6 months. So, but yeah, I will go into more detail around that story because there were so many just in those months where we were together. It was just such a roller coaster. So, yeah. So anyway, I got pregnant from this guy. And at first I was just like stunned. I was like, holy moly, what am I gonna do? Like, I'm not in my country. I'm with this older guy that just got out of jail. It was, I really didn't know what to do. So I decided to go in meditation and ask my higher self or God or the universe. I don't remember, but I remember that it was like saying that I needed to keep that baby, even though it was amazingly scary. Scary in a way that I don't even know how I would react right now if that would have to. So anyway, yeah. So I decided to keep the baby. And I told Robert that I was pregnant and I couldn't stay there because like it was just way too complicated. And so I decided to leave and I went back to BC where I used to be, and I worked there for a little while. But then when my belly started to show, I had this other intuition that I needed to go back closer to my blood family. And that's what I did. So I got back into my old apartment over like that farm that I was speaking earlier about. And so that was the way I got pregnant. And let me tell you that people around me were not supportive at the beginning. People were freaked out that I was pregnant, and everybody was telling me like that I should just get an abortion, and that I'm not suited to raise a kid, that I'm gonna screw my baby's life up and mine as well, and like people from from around me were not that supportive. But I don't know, I still had this intuition that I needed to go back over there and be closer to them. At the moment, it didn't make any sense because they were, it felt like they were not going to support me. But the thing that is so awesome about that story is that when that moment of telling my families and friends that I was pregnant, and their reaction, and the fact that I just knew that I had to keep that baby and that everything was going to be all right. Like when my friends and family told me that I shouldn't keep it, I felt so calm inside. Like that I was not used to that. I was always like super feisty, or I would just like fight back and tell them off, like fuck off, like you don't know me, you don't like I would be on that range, right? But in that moment, something was different. It was just different. I just was so confident, like strong, and soft at the same time, and loving and caring, but like in a warrior kind of way, but not a warrior that is looking for a fight, but just a warrior that is ready to protect whatever is very precious for them. And so when people were freaking out, I was like, I understand this is how you're seeing the situation. I understand the reputation I have in your eyes, and you can trust me. I trust me, so you can trust me. And if you don't want to trust me, that's your deal. And if you want to trust me, well, cool. Let's do this together. I can not involve you like in the way that you're going to be responsible, but like I can share my experience with you. And so, I don't know, everybody that was like super triggered by that situation, it just didn't feel the same for me. It wasn't triggering for me. It was just cool. I was cool. I was like, this is cool. And so I got back to my place, and my nice farmer friend offered me this apartment again, which was such a blessing. And I actually worked there again while I was super pregnant, and it was amazing to be surrounded again by all of those nice plants and the greenhouses and the smell of the gardens. It was just so cool. And then fall came, and then it was time to give birth. And that birth experience was the coolest, most empowering moment of my life. It was everything. It was everything. I was talking with my best friend. It was super late at night, and then I was super, super, super pregnant. And I was due like any day. and we were talking, and it was super late, and then I started to bleed, but like not in a scary way, but just like, oh, something something is happening, right? And as I said, I was acting from intuition from the beginning, and so I never opened the book, never looked on the internet to see what's like, how would everything happen with the birth experience, or how I would raise that kid, or it wasn't like that. It was just me and my belly contemplating in the mirror and being just like mind blown about like what my body can actually do, and me connecting with that little baby that had like hiccup all the time. And she was already super sweet, super soft, super like gentle, and it was just the sweetest little girl that I was carrying, right? And so at that moment when it was time to give birth, I was just so calm. I was just like full on confident. And so I was talking with my friend, and I started to bleed, and I was like, dude, yeah, I'm gonna go and drive you back home, and because that was the deal. And I got back to my house, and it was super late, like, I don't know, like 3 o'clock in the morning. And the whole 3 hours that I kind of slept, it was, I guess, was enough to it got me through the next day. And so around 6, I started to have those contractions that were like getting closer and closer. And I called back my friend, and I was like, yeah, like around 10, I guess, like later on in the morning, I called her, and I was like, yeah, I think this is happening like right now, and I would love for you to come and get me into the hospital, because I didn't have any midwife at the moment, or doula, or because I was so late in the game when I got back into my hometown that no one was available to help me deliver that baby. So I was like, okay, that's cool. I am already knowing from the beginning that I'm going to be a single parent, and I'm feeling so strong about that. I'm just owning the shit out of this experience, and we got to the hospital, and they want to just plug me on all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, hell no. Nope. This is not happening. And so, yeah. So we were like in the room, and I was with my best friend, the one that I was talking with the night prior to my birth experience. And I was also with my other super good friend at the time, which was my brother's girlfriend. And I was also with the mother of my best friend, because, well, we need an older woman to be there at this moment, right? And so I was surrounded by those 3 women in the hospital room, the smallest room ever. And we're all there together, and they're all like you got the wisdom there, and you got like my best friend, which is like a little like fun person to be around. And so she's just lighting up, like she makes everything look fun, and so it's cool. And we have like my sister-in-law, which is like super into spiritual stuff and like meditation and breathing, and so she's like with me 100% on that experience. And like she's like massaging me in the back, and like everybody is like everybody got their role, right? And I'm in the middle of all that. And when the nurses start like they're trying to get into the room, they're like, nope, I think they're okay. And then like when the doctor because it was time to push, right? And then the doctor was there, and she was like, well, at first the nurse were like, don't push. And I was like, fuck off. Like, I'm not pushing. She's pushing. Like this is happening. I don't care. And then they were like, hey, we need the doctor. And so they finally got the doctor there, and I was like they were trying to push me like to lay down, and I was just not having it, right? Anyway, so we got to the point where I really did push for real, and I only needed like that one push, and the baby was out, and it just felt so special and so empowering, and everything like just fell into places, and I got this little sweet little baby that was like on my tummy, and I was like, hello sweetheart, like this is so freaking weird. And the weirdest thing, it was like, well, if you've seen pictures of me, I have like this dark brown hair and those dark brown eyes, and the father is like Native American, so he has like the super dark eyes, dark skin, dark hair. And one of my aunt were like, hey, I dreamt about your baby and she was blonde with blue eyes. And I was like, yeah, right, that's a nice dream, lady. But then turns out that my girl was blonde with blue hair, and not only blonde but with curly. She's got the craziest curly hair, and I'm having those super flat straight hair, you know, like we look nothing alike. Nothing at all. And yeah, so that's how I became a mother. And then this experience, the birth experience, the pregnancy, the getting pregnant part, everything was just aligned, and it was perfect. It was perfection. And even after that, like, don't want to brag, you guys, but she was the sweetest girl. She was like sleeping through the night, and she was breastfeeding like a champ, and she was so fat, you know, because she was breastfeeding a lot, you know. And she was just amazing. The whole thing, the whole first year was like just amazing. And yeah, so that's how I became a mother, actually. I became a mother exactly at that moment when I gave birth. Well, I guess I became a mother exactly when I got pregnant, and I made the decision of like keeping her. But the whole pregnancy, like, I got in touch with myself as a mother, with that caring, nurturing side of me that I didn't know I had. I felt love for her and for myself in the way that I never experienced before. It was just like, it was enlightenment. It was just like transformative. The whole process was just very transformative. Yeah. So that's it. That's my first story. That's the first story that I'm telling you. That's my personal story. And there are many, many other stories that I'm going to tell you. And I'm going to speak more about that traveling that I did in the States, because it was just so crazy. Oh my God. And I will talk about like my other birth experience eventually, because it was on the other side of the spectrum, and it was, as much as this first one that I just told you was like empowering, the other one was traumatizing. And so I've been through both. And so I'm going to speak about that in another episode. And also I became an unschooling mother, which is a big part of who I am, what I do here on earth. And yes, so I'm going to speak about that as well eventually. So leave in the comment which of the story you want me to tell you, and that will be the next one I'll tell. And I hope you enjoyed this story, and I invite you to take a look at all those amazing interviews that I did with all kinds of beautiful, amazing people. And yeah, subscribe and send me your thought. I wanna connect with you, because this is very important to me. We need to step into our aligned way of living. I think this is time, and I care so much about your stories and your way of entering this new phase of humanity. So on that note, I'm gonna leave you to that. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day or night or whatever, whenever you're listening to that. And we'll talk soon. Ciao!